The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 4, Language, and addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to use simple sentences appropriately and correctly, and construct acceptable compound and complex sentences by using clauses, phrases, and conjunctions. Hi again. Just like a racing car mechanic spends hours working on and tuning a car for peak performance, we need to work on tweaking our English grammar to be able to express ourselves, speak or write effectively. Each word or sentence you use needs to be put together in a specific way, just like the parts of a motor car. Remember, in our last lesson we worked on clauses and learned how to identify them. We also looked at the differences between main and subordinate clauses. Main clauses can stand on their own, whereas subordinate clauses depend on the main clause to make sense. Here is an idea of where we are in the structure of language. We have looked at the different parts of a sentence, phrases and clauses. We have also learned that clauses can be divided into main and subordinate clauses. Today we are expanding on clauses and specifically the adverbial clause. They tell us more about verbs. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify an adverbial clause and know the difference between adverbial clauses of time, place, reason, and condition. Before we start on clauses, let's shift into reverse gear and get back to verbs and adverbs themselves. A verb can be a doing word, right? Like runs, falls, drops. Or a verb can give a state of existence, like is. An adverb gives us more information about the verb itself, like runs quickly, falls slowly, drops suddenly, and is angry. The petrol attendant runs quickly. The car tire falls slowly. The assistant drops the wrench suddenly. The mechanic is angry. So what do we call these words that I've added? They are adverbs. Remember the definition of an adverb? Adverbs give us more information about verbs. We can give more meaning to verbs by using the right adverbs. In the same way, we can give more meaning to verbs by adding adverbial clauses, which take the place of adverbs. Let's recap. Do you remember what a clause is? A clause is a group of words that contains a finite verb. A clause sometimes behaves like a part of speech. Do you remember the difference between a main clause and a subordinate clause? A main clause can stand on its own and make sense. And a subordinate clause usually tells us more about the main clause and depends on the main clause for meaning. Our focus today is on adverbial clauses. Remember that I said an adverb explains more about the verb. Well, so does the adverbial clause. Here is a sentence. Sam left Davidton after he filled his car with petrol. Now what do we do first? We find the clauses. And how do we find the clauses? We look for the verbs, the finite verbs, those that have a tense and a subject. So, where are the finite verbs in this sentence? There are two finite verbs. Sam left Davidton and he filled his car with petrol. That means there are two clauses in the sentence. Two clauses in the sentence. Now, which one of them can stand on its own and make sense? That will be the main clause. The words Sam left Davidton form the main clause. Why? Because they can stand alone and make sense. The subordinate clause is after he filled his car with petrol. Although this clause has a finite verb, it does not make sense on its own. All easy so far. We've done this before. Now for the next step. We have to decide what type of subordinate clause this is. How does it work in the sentence? What does this clause, after he filled his car with petrol, refer to? Let's look at it again. The clause, after he filled his car with petrol, tells us more about when he left Davidton. It is giving us more information about the verb left. It is a clause telling us more about a verb, so it is an adverbial clause. Let's check the definition. An adverbial clause is a group of words that do the work of an adverb. It usually starts with a word like before, when, where, after, since, because, and so. This is really quite easy because we know what an adverb is and we certainly know how to spot a subordinate clause. Now that we've got the background in place, let's move on. We are going to look at 4 different types of adverbial clauses. They are clauses of time, place, reason, and condition. Clauses of time will tell us more about when the action happened. Sam drove off after he got the petrol. So in our earlier sentence about Sam leaving Davidton, we used an adverbial clause of time. He left when his tank was filled. Now let's figure out the rest for ourselves. Clauses of place will tell us more about where the action took place. Clauses of reason will tell us about why the action took place, and clauses of condition will tell us what has to happen. Before the action can take place. Let's get some practice now. Here is a sentence. I ate my snack after I parked the car. As always, we first need to find the main clause and the subordinate clauses. Let's underline the verbs. I ate and I parked. With 2 finite verbs, there must be 2 clauses. These are I ate my snack and after I parked the car. Can one of these clauses stand on its own and make sense? The first clause can. So that is the main clause. Now we need to decide what type of clause the subordinate clause is. What is it telling us more about? It's telling us more about eating, about the verb ate. So this must be an adverbial clause. Specifically, it is telling us when the eating happened. When did I eat my snack? After I parked the car. That makes it an adverbial clause of time. If we change the word after to read before, I will not have changed the type of clause as it would still relate to time. In the sentence we just looked at, the adverbial clause of time was introduced by the word after. Here are some more words that often start adverbial clauses of time. Before, when, after, since, until, while, as, whenever, and as soon as. All these words have to do with time. Let's look at another example. I ate my snack where I could watch the traffic. In this sentence, the verbs are ate and watch. The main clause is I ate my snack, just as in our last example. Now let's work out what type of subordinate clause where I could watch the traffic is. Because the clause gives us more information about the verb ate, it must be an adverbial clause. Specifically, the adverbial clause tells us where I ate, so it is an adverbial clause of place. Just like adverbial clauses of time, adverbial clauses of place also often start with certain words. For an adverbial clause of place, look out for the words where and wherever. So far, we have looked at adverbial clauses of time and place. We have asked when and we have asked where. Next, we look at the adverbial clause of reason. These tell us why the event happened. Here is an example. Mr. Ndaba paid great bonuses because his mechanics repaired so many cars in January. Let's underline the finite verbs. What are they? You are quite correct. It's paid and repaired. Two finite verbs means that there are two clauses. Our next step is to identify the main clause, the one which can stand on its own and make sense. The main clause is Mr. Ndaba paid great bonuses. The rest of the sentence, because his mechanics repaired so many cars in January, is the subordinate clause. What type of subordinate clause is this? It is telling us about why Mr. Ndaba paid bonuses. So it is telling us more about the verb paid. This is an adverbial clause. What kind of adverbial clause is it? Time, place, reason, or condition. The word because introduces the clause, and this is our clue. It gives us a reason why, and thus it is an adverbial clause of reason. Here are some words that often begin adverbial clauses of reason. Look out for words like because, as, since, for, in that. But hey, we've got one more kind of adverbial clause to do. This time we are going to look for an adverbial clause of condition. Here is the sentence. Boosie will do the extra work if she will earn more money. We need to look for the finite verbs, and now they are really easy to find. Will do and will earn. There are two finite verbs, and that means two clauses. Now, which is the main clause? That's not hard. The main clause is Boosie will do the extra work. So the subordinate clause is if she will earn more money. This subordinate clause tells us the condition under which Boosie will do the extra work. She won't just do it unless her condition is met. The word if gives us the clue that we are about to be given a subordinate clause of condition. Now we have also looked at adverbial clauses of reason and of condition. Adverbial clauses of condition are often introduced by the words if or unless. Remember, the first word of the subordinate clause gives us clues to the type of clause it is. Also remember that the following words are often used to introduce the different types of adverbial clauses. Wow, we have covered a lot of important grammar in this lesson. If you apply the process carefully and logically, you'll soon get used to analyzing sentences and identifying different types of subordinate clauses. When you have to identify the parts of a sentence, remember these steps. Find the finite verbs. Identify the main clause. See how many subordinate clauses there are. See what word the subordinate clause tells you more about. Look at the starting words of each subordinate clause. Decide which type of subordinate clause it is. For your task today, take the following main clause and add to it an example of each of the 4 types of adverbial clauses we learnt about today. Here is the main clause. I listen to music. Hey, today was quite a challenge. You know all about adverbial clauses, parts of a sentence that adds vuma to your sentences. Like a car that's got the tires full of air. Your English will go better if you use these parts of speech when you talk and when you write. Thanks for watching and bye for now.